Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to do some cut testing on a knife that y'all haven't seen for about a year now. So one of the first knives that I ever reviewed on this channel was this Benchmade Taggedout carbon fiber. This is a clone. This is not the real deal. The action is not quite on to par probably with the real deal. Maybe it is. I don't know. It does have pretty good tension in that axis lock, though. I got to give him credit for that. That's almost too much. I mean, that's pretty springy. And there's not a lot to grab onto to Spidey flick it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start out where this came from. So this was a Temu knife. I think I did pay $33 for this because I thought, ooh, full real carbon fiber, which it is in fact full real carbon fiber. There are no steel liners other than the little tiny liner, which supports the axis lock, which if y'all haven't seen the inside of these before, that really just fills in this little space here. It almost follows that curve around this around the screw head right here, and then it goes back up in here, and that's what gives you the liners that hold the axis lock. Interesting knife. So this is interesting from a few. Let's start by going down the specs, and then I'll talk a little bit more in detail about what I like and don't like about this thing. So you can see, I'll bring these up. This thing has nailed the specs on the real one in almost all of these categories. You can see all the green check marks. So it's a little over 8 inches long. So this is a medium to full size knife, 8 and an eighth basically inches long. The blade is almost 3.5 inches long, probably a little bit less than that. There's a little bit of a sharpening choil right there. Pretty cool. Closed length 4.69 inches. So this is a pretty tall knife compared to a lot of other knives that you might carry. Blade thickness 0.09, or sorry, yeah, 0.09. So it's 91 thousandths. That's a pretty thin and slicey blade, and that's true to the original. I was kind of surprised to see they actually nailed that on the thinness. The handle thickness just a little under a ½ inch. These are contoured, nicely contoured carbon fiber scales on here. It does have a G10 backspacer, a little bit dull. That's, you know, one of the things that you don't get very well with the replicas is that oftentimes the colorful bits are not quite as colorful as the real original ones are. At any rate, that's okay. For the amount of money, I'm still pretty happy with all that. The real ones have a Cerakote finish. This is definitely not a Cerakote finish. I got to give it some props. It is a pretty tough finish. I have cut a whole bunch of boxes and stuff. If you get this thing in the right light, you can see some light scuff marks on this thing. We're going to see how this holds up in the testing here. When I take it through, you know, 400 inches of cardboard, we're going to see how well it holds up. But I got to give it some props that this knife has actually been used a fair bit in breaking down boxes, and it hasn't really taken that finish off. So it's a pretty good coat of paint. I highly doubt it's Cerakote, however. Obviously, this is a full flat grind. Scales are true carbon fiber, the real deal all the way through. This is not like that peel ply stuff. I love the feel of real carbon fiber, especially in cold weather. It doesn't get cold. You know, you can have this thing sitting in your pocket during the wintertime, take it out. It's not uncomfortable to use or to hold. It does have pretty good solid action on it. The real one comes in a Magna Cut blade steel. We have no idea what this is. This one, oh, it must also come in a 154 because that's what this says here, right? CPM 154. I don't know if the carbon fiber versions, maybe they came in a 154. I think the regular non-carbon fiber, I'm pretty sure they did. But I doubt this is a CPM 154 either. The weight on this thing, a little over 2.5 ounces, y'all. That is incredibly lightweight for a 3.5 inch cutting blade. For 2.5 ounces in your pocket, that is a good trade-off. Obviously a little bit more than the original, but again, I'll take that. The axis lock, as I mentioned, pretty solid on this thing. It doesn't have a whole lot to grab onto. It's nearly impossible to thumb flick this thing. There's just not a lot to really get action from, so you're pretty much stuck with a barely there Spidey reverse flick. Now, you can use the axis lock, of course. So many people do that. You hold that lock down, you can flip it in and out, just piece of cake like that, right? The real one cost $365. This cost $33, less than a tenth of that price. Behind the edge is really thin because this started out, you know, at 90 thousandths, and then I've sharpened this blade too. I had to get out my book here. I got my little knife sharpening book because I had to go back and find what did I sharpen this to. So this started at a 20 degrees. I reprofiled it to 18 degrees. I did go up to the 600 grit, did not an 800 grit, so I tried to leave it a little rougher than like mirror polish. Pretty soft on those last few stones, but it did come out really good, nice and even and sharp. So we'll look at the sharpness in just a second. Of course, that's what we're here to test. I did get a fairly even edge on that, but it doesn't even look like a very tall edge, but that's because it's so thin. And that brings me back to the behind the edge. Down here, this is 12 thousandths of an inch behind the edge, and that's where the orange starts, right? I'm measuring all the way to the beginning of the orange when I say behind the edge for me, up to about 15 thousandths as you get up here towards the tip. Either way, that's incredibly slicey and thin. So I'm excited to see what this will do. Have no idea about the quality of the steel. That's why we do this. But in terms of sharpness, the way you can tell a knife is really sharp is that, you know, of course, any knife that's sharp, if you slice, if I'm pulling that blade across the paper, yeah, it's going to cut. But if you have a knife that you don't have to move at all and you can just push the same piece all the way through, that's how you know that's a 10 out of 10 on the old redneck sharpening scale. So, oh, I didn't even do size comps, y'all. I'm sorry. I'm a little thrown out of whack. I usually try to follow a script, and I'm just not doing a good job of that at all. Let's do a couple quick size comps. It's impossible, I know, to tell from these videos how big it is. This is the size of a PM2, right? This is your PM2 size knife, but in a 2.5 ounce package. Clearly larger than the pair of 3 here. Let's do just a couple more. Always break out the 𝗧𝗴𝗴𝗲𝗏 Vision, one of the still best all-time EDC knives, and the good old Ozark Trail, the best $10 knife you can buy. It's actually bigger than both. It's even longer than the 𝗧𝗴𝗴𝗲 Vision FG. Let's look at the cutting edge. It's got it beat by a pretty decent amount. Obviously different shapes, but you can see it beats it at least by 1/2 inch in the cutting length area as well. One final one for my dollar bill guys out there. A couple of you have said, hey, yeah, I do like that dollar bill. Let's throw it on a dollar bill. You can see I'll try to line up the back end of it from my angle. I know that may not look right to y'all, but trust me, I get a better angle on this thing. There you go. That's what it looks like in comparison to a dollar bill. All right, so we know how sharp this is. Reprofile down to an 18 degree. This is 10 out of 10. Let's get over to the cutting table and do some cutting. And as always, we're going to start with our cardboard cutting test. I've got 390 square inches. I am choked forward, I guess you would call it, on this knife. There's a little flat spot at the front of those carbon fiber scales, a little raised up higher than the blade itself, but allows you to get a good forward grip on it. And that way you trap the cardboard. It doesn't get trapped into the sharpening choil. There's a little sharpening choil on the front of this blade. Because it's such a nice, thin, slicey blade to begin with, this thing is, you know, hot knife through butter, no problems at all tearing up cardboard if that's what you want to use this for, and this is very, very capable of doing so. And I can tell you, I'm sitting here looking at the knife even afterwards, and I can see that it didn't even really do any damage to the paint on the blade. So whatever that coating is, it's pretty tough. I know it's not whatever they said it was, but still pretty good. But the real question is going to be, of course, how dull does it get after the cardboard? So first pass is pretty good there, and second pass, so I can see I've got a little nick, but it will, you can see if you cut at a decent pace, you can cut right through it. So that's how I, you know, judge the difference between a 7 or an 8 on the sharpness scale. So I'm going to continue cutting to see how bad is that snag. I don't really feel anything, and I can kind of cut past it if I just cut fast enough. So this one's kind of an in-betweener for me. We're going to give it an 8.5 for now. Let's roll on with the test, see what else we get. This isn't really scored, but you can see because of that belly, the tip is a little bit higher. So a lot of draw cuts, which is what we do a lot of with EDC, you just got to raise your arm up just a little bit higher. I'm going to try to cut with just kind of the belly of the knife, and it cut through part of it, but the top of this piece of cardboard is just bent down, so you really have to pull hard through it. So it is what it is. That's not certainly its strongest point, but this is where the belly will become a real asset. So the other cutting tests that we'll do, like this hose and the rope coming up next, this is where having a good belly makes a world of difference. And again, this sharp, thin, slicey blade, right through the hose, no issues. You know, if that's what you need to do with it, this is more than capable of handling it. Little tiny chopping chores, and this is where the belly becomes a real advantage. So, like all knives, big pros and cons. Let's see if that did any more damage out there. I really only cut out towards the tip of the blade, and you can see, if you cut fast, you'll go right through it. If you slow down, you will pick up that little snag that was there from the cardboard. But we saw that in the cardboard, and I don't believe it's really gotten any worse. It's still, and see, you can cut right past it without too much effort. So this is like trying to judge the difference between an 8 and a 9 or a 7 and an 8. We're going to keep it at 8.5. I don't think it had any more damage. Like with the hose, this is where the belly comes in really good. What I'm looking for is to pop right through this rope without having to saw it. But if you see what the rope is doing to me, this is really very frustrating for me. The rope is fraying on me as I'm trying to cut it. It splits down into multiple strands, and so I can't get the cut all the way through it. So part of this is much the rope. I know that kind of sounds like a cop-out. Oh, it's the rope's fault. But if you see it, you can see how badly it's fraying as I'm trying to cut. Now, that may be because the blade is just not sharp enough to cleanly cut right through it. So, mixed bag on the rope. It certainly can do it. You don't have to raise it up on a board or anything, but let's see if it did any more damage. That sisal rope is pretty rough on blades. And you can see, if you cut fast, you can cut right through any of those little nicks that have developed in the blade. I'm really trying to dial in, did I do any more damage out on the belly of this blade? And you can see it's still pretty darn sharp. It will cut right through all of that. So I'm actually pretty impressed with what we're seeing on this knife so far. We definitely have seen a lot worse performance, but it probably took a little bit of a hit here, so I'm going to knock it down to a 7.5. We'll keep on going, see what the wood does for us. Wood cutting test, same as always, I'm going to choke forward on that blade to start off with. I will say again, I've said this in all my tests, but I know everybody doesn't watch all the tests. This is a really hard piece of wood here. It's just a pine board, a pine 2x2, but this piece of wood is really hard. So I'm looking for bite. Does it bite into the wood? And yes, it definitely is biting into the wood really well. But I'm also looking for ergonomics more than anything here. That clip is really good. That short stubby clip is perfect. So no hot spots there. Now I'm going to choke back on the blade, and we'll see if that makes any difference in terms of ergonomics, the feel of it. You know, can I generate any more power into it? And still, really good bite into the wood. So I'm going to give the blade high marks. We'll see how well it lasts in a minute. But ergonomically, I'm actually pretty impressed with this knife. You feel just a little bit because the knife itself is thin. You know, if your hands are soft and you're really grinding into wood, you'll feel that. And this is another interesting result here. You can see those snags are not showing up anymore. And I've seen this on countless tests. If y'all have watched my tests, you've seen it as well. For some reason, after you cut the wood, which is pretty hardcore cutting, it either realigns the edge of the blade, it somehow takes those micro nicks out of the edge. It's almost like sharpening it or stropping it on that board, which is a strange thing, but I've seen it so many times now. It's just, I know what it is. So it has definitely gotten sharper than it was previously. I'm going to put it back to an 8.5. We'll strop this thing up and bring it home. And just in case anybody is wondering, the dark brown side of my strop here is a 16 micron diamond emulsion. Somebody referred that to me, and it's been great. The green side is a 6 micron emulsion, just to finish it off. I lost count on the front side. I think I ended up with 12 strokes per side on the dark and then 10 on the green, so 22 strokes per side total on the strop. And as you can see, we are definitely back to shaving sharp. Absolutely 10 out of 10 all the way back. That stropping setup really works wonders, but we weren't really that far off of dull anyhow. It was only an 8.5, so we didn't have far to go. The strop can certainly handle that, but that's a good sign. It's nice and easy to strop back, which makes this a more desirable, affordable, you know, EDC kind of knife. All right, let's take a look at the results here. Down the right-hand side is our Benchmade Taggedout Replica. I paid $33 on Temu for this about a year ago. I've still seen them from time to time. They seem like they come and go all the time. I've seen them there lately. I have no idea what the steel is. They didn't tell us what it was, so I don't know what the HRC rating or what Knife Steel Nerds would rate it. I did resharpen it, as mentioned at the beginning of the video, down to 18 degrees. Started as a 10 out of 10 on the sharpness scale. We did 390 square inches of cardboard. After the cardboard, I rated it about an 8.5. We had some minor nicks in the blade. kind of normal fare, but actually not bad at all compared to some recent blades we've tested. I did 6 hose cuts because one of them popped off the table on me and I didn't want to pick it up. So I did 6 hose cuts. Didn't really change the sharpness at all. I still gave it an 8.5. We did our 10 rope cuts. A little bit of a mixed bag on that. The rope certainly was not cooperating, but you know, part of it might have been the blade itself too. But nonetheless, it didn't really do a whole lot more damage. It did probably make it a little bit worse, so I rated it as a 7.5. Then we did our wood cutting, which we just saw a second ago, and it somehow magically, like it always seems to do, resharpened the blade. And those nicks were almost gone at that point, so I had to mark it back up to an 8.5. We did the strops. I did 20 per side, actually 22 per side, I think I just said. And after that, it was a 10 out of 10. Overall, man, this is really much better than I expected for this knife. This is a really nice, thin, slicey blade. Tears up cardboard like nobody's business because of the thinness, that full flat grind, especially having reprofiled it to 18 degrees, put a little bit better of an edge on it. Man, it went through the cardboard like a hot knife through butter. Easy hose and rope cuts, you know, apart from what I just mentioned with the rope fraying a little bit. Some of that was me, some of that was the blade, some of that was the rope. So I'm going to blame that on everybody, but it is what it is. It did just fine when all was said and done. I didn't have to saw it too much. Ergonomically, really good, surprisingly good. No hot spots to speak of. You know, it is a fairly thin knife, and the back of the blade where you're really putting your thumb, if you're really bearing into cuts like we did on the wood, you know, it's a thin blade. It's not going to cut you, but you'll feel it on the back of your thumb. No big deal. Ergonomically, I got to give this a 9 out of 10 on ergonomics. So that was all good. Love that short little pocket clip. Man, this is a 3.5-inch blade, and this knife only weighs 2.5 ounces. It's got really good, in my opinion, good quality, solid carbon fiber scales. It is a contoured carbon fiber. For $33, this is a fantastic little EDC. You know, and it always seems to get better after I sharpen them anyhow, but that kind of brings back life to this thing. It makes it more interesting to me all over again. Deployment is the downside with this knife. It's not easy to deploy with that kind of pill-shaped hole, which is really the only deployment method. I guess no, it's not true. If you want to use the axis lock and pull the axis lock back to flip it open and close, you could certainly do that. But most people are going to try to flip it open. I guess Spidey Flick is the only real way to open and close it. So a little bit of a bummer on the fidgety factor, and the ease of deployment's not great, but it's doable. Anybody who's done a reverse flick can easily enough do this knife. And the action overall is good. The detent from that axis lock, it's got good tension on it, so it's dialed in very nice. The blade was centered. I mean, it's hard to complain about this thing the way it performed overall. So I'm going to give this, I gave it a 7.5 on edge retention and an 8 on EDC. Now, like I said, there's a few things that would have made it a better EDC. If I just had some really good deployment methods on this thing that was easier to do, this would probably be a 9 or a 10 on EDC. So I'm curious, have any of y'all bought one of these knives? They've been out forever on Temu, and I know a bunch of people have been picking them up. So I'm curious what y'all's experience with this is. How's it held up for you? Have any of y'all really put it to the test and tried it and give it some hard work to see how your edge holds up? Did you sharpen it first? Always like to hear what you guys think. As always, if you haven't joined our little band of renegades, we'd love to have you join us here in the dark corners of the interwebs reviewing these kind of knives. Hit that subscribe button. That really helps out little channels like me. If you haven't already, throw me a thumbs up on your way out the door. That is also of tremendous help to a channel like mine. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys as always. Look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Hope y'all have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. See ya.